Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today I'm on the sandbox test server testing out field modifications, which Wargaming are presenting a way for you to be able to tune your vehicle, your favorite tank, maybe that first one that you fell in love with, in the way that you want to play the tank. Now, as this is a sandbox test server, remember everything that I'm going to be talking about in this video is subject to heavy amounts of change or may not even go into the game at all. So, field modification, what exactly is it? Well, if you click in the top right hand corner of the screen near the research tab, you will be presented with a whole new page of information. Okay, so here you can actually spend experience, either free experience or experience that you have earned on the tank to be able to increase its level. And when you do this, you're going to be able to unlock a series of things. Now, tier 10 tanks are going to be able to go all the way up to modification level 8, while tier 6 tanks such as the MT25 are going to be able to go up to modification level 5, meaning that only the real top tier tanks are going to be able to get all of the goodies. Okay, so what exactly do you unlock? Currently, the amount of experience that you're going to have to spend is 28,000 to be able to reach level 1, and that is only in a single one of your tier 10 tanks. Now, again, all of this is subject to change. What Wargaming want the grinding requirements to be remains to be seen, but 28,000, if you have to get 8 levels, is going to be a whopping 224,000 experience, i.e. probably the amount that you would have to grind in a tier 9 tank to be able to get a tier 10 tank. That is a lot of play, and when you think that there are 20, 30, 40 tier 10 tanks in the game, that could be a little bit brutal. So irrelevant of how much this is going to cost to be able to grind with experience, let me break down all of the different stages for you so you can see what you may or may not have to look forward to. Alright, so after you go through field modification level 1, you get a second essentials loadout for your consumables and your ammunition. So you'll have a whole new tab here that you can click for all of the vehicles which you reach this level on, and you can take different amounts of ammunition. So maybe you want to have your second one with full HE rounds, even though they're really not going to be useful in the next patch of World of Tanks. And then you might have, I don't know, a cheap set of consumables, or you might even want to use a fire extinguisher instead of using a premium food consumable. Why you would do that on a light tank, I think is a bit of a dubious decision, but maybe you would want to anyway. So what this allows you to do is effectively have two different setups, and as you load into the battle, you can actually switch the setup that you want to use in the first 30 seconds. So maybe you're a tier 8 tank that's spawning against loads of tier 10 tanks. Oh, probably want to use those premium consumables, or if there's loads of artillery on the enemy team, maybe a premium med kit, or maybe you're a tier 8 tank that got that fabled matchmaking against tier 6 tanks, and then you can use small consumables, or maybe even give up the premium consumable and then use a manual fire extinguisher, or take a lot of regular rounds rather than gold rounds. I think this is a really cool change. It does provide a little bit of flexibility, and especially for tech tree tanks that want to be able to take a second consumable loadout so they can have more gold rounds against higher tier vehicles, or even vehicles that have very low amounts of ammunition, such as the AMX-12T, for example. I'd love to have more AP rounds in my nice matchups, and I'd rather have more gold rounds when I'm having to deal with those tier 8 tanks. I personally really like this feature. I think it's definitely more of a convenience thing, and it will allow you to be more flexible and deal with the RNG of the matchmaker. Alright, so what happens when you go to level 2 of standard modification? Well, now, this is where you can make a decision on a bunch of your vehicles. For example, on light tanks, you can either decide to be able to go 2 kilometers an hour faster forwards at the expense of 3% of your engine power, or alternatively, you could go 2 kilometers an hour slower forwards, but have 3% increased engine power. Now, whichever one you decide to do is going to cost you 150,000 credits. And the real sucky thing is that after you purchase it, if you want to change your mind and maybe not use the modification at all, then you have to destroy it. You don't get the 150,000 credits back, and then if you want to switch to it again because you decided that it was what you really wanted to use, well, you have to pay the 150,000 credits again. And so just like that, I've spent 300,000 credits. Seems a bit excessive. Wargaming, I would strongly recommend that you allow people to purchase the upgrade and then be able to switch between them depending on how they want to play the tank on any given day. I understand that Wargaming maybe want this to be more of a permanent feature on a vehicle, and they arguably don't want people to switch between them easily But on the other hand, if I'm spending 150,000 credits on something, I at least want the luxury of possibly changing my mind or alternatively going back to it again. So once you reach level 3, you're actually going to get access to possibly one of the coolest and I'd say the biggest thing about field modifications. And that is that now if we go into the garage, you'll see that we have a second loadout of equipment available. This is absolutely outrageous stuff. So for example, on my T100 LT, maybe I want to have my full spotting setup, which would be the commander's vision system, coated optics and vents in my first loadout. And on my second one, maybe I've got on a map where I'm not really needed to do any spotting. And so I'm going to go for vents, I'm going to go for a gun rammer. And you know what, maybe I'll even go for vertical stabilizers on a T100 LT, although it doesn't really need one. I could maybe even take improved hardening to be able to make my tracks more durable and increase my hit points. This provides a huge amount of opportunity for a lot of light tanks and also for other vehicles as well to be able to customize your equipment. You can also customize the directive slot that you're going to be using. Maybe you want to be using a vent purging directive if you're playing ranked, whereas for your vision setup, maybe you want to just be able to see further. And again, just like the consumable setup, you're able to switch this inside the battle. Now, all in all, I think this sounds absolutely amazing. But let's not forget, this is going to double the amount of equipment that you're going to have on your vehicles. I know there are some free-to-play players out there that struggle to be able to afford the equipment for their tanks, let alone to be able to afford having 2 sets of equipment on their vehicles. And considering that depending on the tank type, a full set of equipment at tier 10 can cost you in the region of 1,000,000 credits, plus depending on whether you're purchasing it at a discount. Now the equipment cost of your tier 10 tanks and all of the vehicles that want to use this dual loadout is going to get extortionately high. Now I'm sure Wargaming are going to say, well, it's expensive, but you don't have to use it. You could only use one setup if you really wanted. But let's be honest, it's going to become almost mandatory to use it on many tank types. Think about the Rheinmetall Panzerwagen, for example. You could get yourself an absolute filthy bush setup using commander's vision system, vents and binoculars on this tank to get 608 meters view range, or alternatively when you load onto your city map, use vents, gun rammer and vertical stabilizers. This will revolutionize the way that you could play your light tanks. And it's not just light tanks that are going to benefit from this. Imagine if you're playing your mouse, well, maybe you want to try and use a turbo and you could use an improved configuration along with an improved hardening to just be able to get those tracks on quicker. But oh no, there's loads of artillery on the enemy team. Well, why don't you drop in a super heavy spall liner to be able to massively reduce the amount of damage that you're going to take from self-propelled guns. And if you use a super heavy spall liner, maybe then you can drop out the med kit and you can not use a med kit and you can use fuel instead to be able to get quicker into cover to avoid those pesky artillery. The possibility for setting up your vehicles will be outrageous. And again, the cost is going to be a lot more. And really, I see this becoming a mandatory thing for you to be able to get. And considering that to be able to get to this level, we've already had to get 28,000 times by 3 experience into the tank. Yeah, it can get very costly indeed. All right, so let's keep grinding our way up through the T100 LT. We've reached level 3. What do we get at level 4? At level 4, for example, with our light tanks, we could make our vehicle more accurate, but we could increase the reload time, or alternatively, we could make our vehicle less accurate, but we could improve our reload time. If we go up to level 5, we're presented with the option of increasing our tank's reverse speed, but making us more vulnerable to high explosive damage and more vulnerable to stun duration, and our crew will get injured more frequently. Or alternatively, we could make our vehicles slower backwards, but we're actually more protected from artillery, from stunning, and our crew will be protected as well. That's pretty outrageous when I think about it. That's a real sacrifice. And so you can see that some of these field modifications are going to be a real big decision across a variety of your tank types. Okay, next, now we've reached level 6 field modification, and this is an absolute huge one. What this allows you to do is to add a second custom equipment slot. So you can have a bonus. For example, on our T100 LT, we've already got the vision slot by default, and we can either add a firepower slot or we could add ourselves a mobility slot. If we were to add ourselves a mobility slot, for example, that would now mean that light tanks for the very first time would be able to get a bonus from a turbocharger to be able to go even quicker than they already do. But if we picked the firepower slot, for example, we could put a gun rammer in and we could get a nice 1.5% rate of fire bonus. Now, I quite like this feature for a couple of reasons. Number one, the amount of people who are using bounty equipment and the amount of people who are using bond equipment is just increasing and increasing. And when you have more slots available, that is not going to help the bounty player at all. It's not going to help the person who's using that bond equipment. It is going to help the players who don't have access to all of the fancy equipment, because it is going to make that equipment more competitive, reducing the disparity from your very hardcore players and your more casual players who want to use the regular class of equipment that used to be the best equipment in the game for the vast majority of the World of Tanks release. So from that perspective, I really like it. However, there is another perspective which is actually incredibly dangerous, and that is, for example, the mouse can choose a mobility slot. And so this means, for the first time, in my opinion, the most important module on the mouse and all vehicles that are limited to about 25 kilometers and below, the turbocharger will be getting the slot bonus. This is a massive buff to all heavy tanks effectively because of the mobility increase and the opportunity to get the class bonus from the turbo. That means that your engine power will go up by 2.5%, and importantly, your reverse speed and your forward speed will go up by an entire kilometer just from having that slot bonus. This is where it starts to really worry me, because these are not small changes. These field modifications are really not going to be optional. Wargaming in their video on the matter said it's not really going to make too much of a difference. Is 1% really going to matter? And it comes down to the actual tanker playing the tank. Sure it does. I do agree with you, Wargaming. But there's no doubt that the same player who can go that 1 kilometer an hour faster, which in the case of the mouse, because it's limited to 20, is going to be, that 5% extra speed. Or if we're thinking about going from 24 to 25, that 4% extra speed. It is very significant indeed. And the fact that to be able to grind to this level, I would have had to have played the mouse for 150,000 experience, kind of worries me about how Wargaming are going to set the bar for grinding, or alternatively, why we even needed to put this behind a play wall anyway. Surely if they're going to add a field modification system, why does it have to be behind a grinding gate, when some of the ways that you can change your vehicle are completely dramatic? Let's take a look at the mouse, for example. Look at this one, boys and girls. We could put a lightweight turret on this tank, which means that we actually have 5% increased vehicle traverse, and we can go an additional 2 kilometers an hour faster, but we are more vulnerable to high explosive damage on the enemy team. And then the final system, we can improve our ammo rack, fuel tank, and engine durability at the expense of turret traverse and a little bit of turret traverse dispersion, while also further increasing our repair speed by 10%. This means that my mouse is now able to go at 27 kilometers an hour, which is just simply outrageous. The idea that a stock mouse without the correct equipment and without all of the modifications will only go at 20 compared to a mouse that can go at 27 while still being at least 90 or 95% as good in all of the other areas, it's a no-brainer. And considering that Wargaming keep adding more and more and more equipment and more bonus slots and more everything into the game to be able to allow vehicles that are true super heavies to just go quicker and quicker, it's really no surprise why the battles of World of Tanks seem to be developing so quickly, why you're having tier 10 games that are over in 2 to 3 minutes, or alternatively, the disparity between players is increasing so much that you're going to have very, very hardcore dominant players with all of the tricks available that are going to be able to turn the tide into their team's favor more often. And God forbid that they're in a platoon of 3 people, all completely decked out, tricked out, and then you have 3 people playing the mouse for the first time on your team. Yeah, it's not really going to be going too well, is it? If that wasn't enough, the real thing that's concerning me is that every level that you put your vehicle up for field modification, you just get some kind of base attribute that gets better. In the case of the mouse, every level that you get, you improve your vehicle's hit points up to 7%, meaning that now my mouse, when it's fully tricked out, has 3,470 hit points. And it's not just vehicles like the mouse that gets pretty outrageous bonuses. If we look at the Object 279E early, for example, and we spend 224,000 credits to be able to get it up to level 8, now my vehicle is 3% healthier and it has 4% increased engine power. My Kranvang, for example, has 3% increased hit points, 5% decreased dispersion when I'm moving, and 5% decreased dispersion when I'm turning the hull, which will improve the gun handling significantly. Also for autoloaders, there are crazy good things like the close range kit, which means that after you fire, your aiming circle will be 15% smaller than it otherwise would be, while the only sacrifice is to your vehicle's aiming speed. This means that autoloaders, especially those with great intraclip reloads, such as a TVP T50/51, are going to be able to unload more accurate than ever without having to slow down their rate of fire, even at decent distances. There's so many different ways that you could be able to customize all your vehicles that really I can't go over it in a single video without it being an hour long. So I just thought to myself instead, why don't I take a weak tank like the E50M and try to make it real strong? And ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, what kind of a bonus do you think we could do for an assault medium tank when we can reinforce the joints and we can increase the engine power by 5%, we can reduce the damage that I take from ramming by 10%, and we can increase the damage that we deal to the opponents by 10% when we ram them for only a 2.5% view range penalty? Yeah. Let's take a look to see what we can do with the E50M. Alright, so just to show you how it looks like as we're loading into the battle, pay a close attention here. And it's quite nice that in the replay functionality, you can even see me being able to switch between the two configurations. So we've loaded in with the E50M. You'll see my standard loadout that we have here. I usually use a turbo vent and a gun rammer, and my equipment my consumables will be a repair kit, a med kit, and then some chocolate to be able to perk up my crew. You'll see that by holding Control and pressing 1, I switched out my equipment now to a turbo, a spowl liner, and also the enhanced durability module. And I've also managed to get myself a directive to be able to increase my traverse speed. And we've also got now a repair kit, fuel, and chocolate. Because of course, if I'm using a heavy spowl liner on this vehicle against 3 artillery, while it will help me to be able to reduce the damage that I take from them, more importantly, the spowl liner also reduces the damage that you take when you ram your opponents. And when you combine that with controlled impact on my driver, and you combine that with the new modification perk that we reached for getting level 8 on our E50M to turning into an absolute ram lord, let's just see what we're able to do with the ramming inside this game. So I have to admit, when I think about it with regards to the modifications and being able to customize your equipment inside the battle, the more that I think about it, the more that I think that it's just a little outrageous. I really do hope that Wargaming consider about how much of a grind and a play wall they're going to put this equipment behind, well, the ability to have 2 equipment slots, because as I said, it's definitely not going to be optional. It's certainly going to be more of a mandatory thing to be able to have. And you know what I just decided? How often is this a good idea in the E50M to just go into an autoloader? Well, how can you really compete with 1,000 damage there with a single shot and a ram on a Progetto, right? We have dealt more damage than the E50M would be capable of with its terrible DPM than if we were using a vent, a gun ram, or anything on this vehicle. If we'd increased the damage per minute of our gun, that really wouldn't have had the same impact as being able to pull off a 681 ram on the Progetto, and we weren't even going that quickly. But oh dear, now we've got a TVP in front of us. We've got a T100 LT, we've gone far too forwards, and there's a Bat-Chat with an auto-loading French medium tank gun that's going to be able to claim us. Or is he? Oh! Hello, 702 damage, and all of this engine power means that he can't push me down the slope. And he gets shut down on the ridgeline. And this T100 LT, who thought they were oh so clever, coming in to rush me with your tier 10 Soviet light tank with another auto-loading French vehicle. And we've managed to do 1,500 damage of ramming so far this game, and we're still able to shoot pretty darn well, at least in close quarters combat without the vents, without the gun rammer, and without the vertical stabilizers on this tank. And just like that, a couple minutes into this game, we've managed to go into what looked like would have been an ill-fated situation against the Progetto, got through it, and then handled an aggressive play from a T100 LT and a Bat-Chat. The light bump by the Batchat going into the E50M definitely wasn't the most sensible option for a French medium tank. But what this thing is capable of with this ramming is just truly outrageous. And this wasn't just a one-trick thing that I did in this game. We were able to pull it off in the other 2 or 3 games that we played in the E50M as well. And this is what really worries me about the field modification. Whenever Wargaming add things in, a lot like with the Crew 2.0, you can just make some vehicles outrageously good with it, while other vehicles don't really get that much of a benefit from it. Whenever you add multiple customization options into a game that didn't have them already, the opportunities to be able to min-max in the system are truly outrageous. Everybody watching the E50M here is probably thinking, whoa, that looks like a lot of fun. But remember that this fun also comes at a great cost. We have to be able to grind out over 200,000 experience in this tank. Do you want to go and grind 200,000 experience in your E50M? Or, as Wargaming probably want you to do, go and convert 200,000 free experience so you can be able to play the vehicle as you want to right from the get-go. I think all in all, if everything that they presented on the Sandbox test server was to go into the game, it wouldn't be an apocalyptic disaster like Crew 2.0 would have been. However, unlike Equipment 2.0, which everybody would have had access to right from the get-go, this, in my opinion, goes behind a huge grind wall that I just can't agree with. Wargaming, is it not enough that we've already grinded to the top of the tree? Why are you wanting us to grind in more vehicles once we've already got there? If this was truly going to be a gift to all of your tankers so that they could be able to modify their loved tanks, why would you force them to have to play a lot in all of their different vehicles? If you've got 600 tanks, of which probably 200 are going to be tier 6 or 300 are going to be tier 6 plus, that's a mind-boggling amount of experience that people are going to have to grind. And as I've shown in this video, while you might present it as making 1 or 2% difference to some of your vehicles, with the flexibility that you have with your equipment to assess the situation, and with just some of the absolute outrageous buffs that the vehicles can get, like a mouse that can go at 27 kilometers an hour, this isn't a 1 or 2% change. In my opinion, a vehicle is correctly set up is going to be at least 5 to 10% better than a vehicle that is stock by default. What also greatly concerns me about field modifications is what happens in your tech tree tanks as you're wanting to be able to grind the way up. What also concerns me about field modifications is what happens if you're grinding your way up a tech tree. Can you still have access to field modifications? Well, clearly, as we can see here, that you can only start to grind experience to be able to unlock field modifications after you've already elited the tank. And to be able to elite the tank, you have to be able to unlock the top vehicle. In this case, for the ISU 152, it's the Object 704. Well, Wargaming, what if I have no interest in going up to tier 9? What happens if I have no interest in going up to tier 10? Why can't I just decide I love the ISU 152 and I want to gain access to field modifications? Why do I have to unlock a vehicle that I may or may not want to play? In this case, the Object 704. And the other thing that's concerning about this is it not bad enough to be able to grind your way up a tech tree with the way that your tech tree tanks are, let alone if field modifications go into the game, how it might be to think that that ISU 152 on the enemy team is playing the vehicle purely because they absolutely love it, and so they've managed to keep grinding it because, trust me, there are a lot of weirdos in World of Tanks. I'm not judging, unless you're the kind of player who plays 20,000 games in a Tiger P, then I probably am judging, that will have all of the advantages. And remember that you get that flat bonus for having field modification of 3% dispersion during hull traverse, for example here on our ISU 152, which makes the tank just clearly flat out better. So now as you're grinding your way up a tech tree, while you're grinding up the tech tree, you're not just going to have to deal with premium tanks or reward tanks, which of course get access to field modifications right from the get-go. You're also going to have to deal with all of the other players who just really love tech tree tanks and have them fully unlocked and fully customed up to be outrageous things on the battlefield. And my final point is to remember that you don't get access to all the slots unless you're playing a tier 10 tank. So effectively, what this change will mean is that all of the tier 10 tanks get better by more than all of the tier 9 tanks, which will get better by more than all of the tier 8 tanks. And isn't it hard enough already to be playing a tier 8 tank in those tier 10 matchups, let alone when you're playing against tier 10 tanks that are now souped up and fully modified. So all in all, field modifications. I think that there are some aspects of this that look absolutely awesome. I love the idea of having multiple slots. I also like the idea of having multiple sets of equipment so that you can tune your vehicle to whatever map that you decide to play or whatever matchup that you get into. But there are other things behind horrendous grind walls that I just really can't agree with, and I truly hope that Wargaming take what looks like some fantastic ideas and fantastic hard work on a really good system and a good UI that's been implemented into the game, and they don't try to just force us to play the game more than we would want to, and just improve the game. Wargaming, this is an opportunity for you to just improve the game, not force people to grind to remain competitive in it. And I'd be interested to think what you all think about the field modification system in the comments down below. What do you think about the current price of 220,000 experience to be able to fully mod out a tier 10 tank? What do you like about it? What do you not like about it? Let's get some feedback for Wargaming so we can modify the field modifications into something that hopefully this community will truly love. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that's it for today. Really hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, give it a thumbs up, but if you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And if you're watching this video as it's released on Sunday, it's time for the World of Tanks Tech Tree Showcase, which isn't actually going to be a Tech Tree Showcase today because I'm playing premium tanks all day. I'm going to feature at least about 30, 40, 50 premium tanks on the trot. So if you've ever wanted to know which ones rock and which ones suck, then come along right now and I'll try to let you know where to invest your hard-earned cash. So really looking forward to seeing all of you live right now on twitch.tv/QuickyBaby. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic and hopefully I'll see you soon.